The weight of ashes, the fire that never dies. Caleb Reed stood on the edge of Englewood, Chicago, staring at the charred skeleton of what used to be a tenement building. The air still carried the faint tang of smoke, though the fire had been out for 2 years. At 32, Caleb's broad shoulders and calloused hands marked him as a man built for labor, but his eyes, hollow and restless, told a different story. He hadn't worn his firefighter's gear since that night, the night he lost everything. 2 years ago, Caleb was a hero, or so the papers called him, Station 19's rising star, always the first to run into a burning building. But on that June night, a fire in Englewood spiraled out of control. A family of 4 was trapped on the 3rd floor. Caleb made a call, go for the kids first. He got the 2 boys out, but the ceiling collapsed before he could reach their parents. The scream still woke him at night, sharp as broken glass. The department cleared him of blame, but Caleb didn't. Neither did the neighborhood. Whispers followed him. He chose wrong. He let them die. His wife, Mara, left 6 months later, taking their daughter Sophie with her. You're not here anymore, Caleb, Mara had said, her voice breaking. You're still in that fire. Now Caleb worked odd jobs, construction, mostly, living in a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled of stale coffee and regret. He hadn't seen Sophie in a year, though he sent checks when he could. Tonight, he was back at the site of the fire, drawn like a moth to a flame he couldn't escape. A voice behind him snapped him out of his thoughts. You shouldn't be here, man. It was Javier, his old partner from Station 19, now a captain. Javier's face was lined with concern, his dark eyes searching Caleb's. This place ain't good for you. Caleb shrugged, shoving his hands into his jacket. Nowhere else feels right either. Javier sighed. There's a community meeting tomorrow. They're rebuilding this lot. Thought you should know. Caleb's stomach twisted. Rebuilding meant erasing the past, but it wouldn't erase his guilt. He nodded and walked away, the weight of Javier's gaze heavy on his back. The ghost of a hero. The community center was packed, the air thick with tension. Caleb slipped into the back, hoping to go unnoticed. The meeting was about the new affordable housing project slated for the lot where the fire had happened. Residents, activists, and city officials filled the room, their voices clashing over budgets and promises. A young woman stood at the podium, her presence commanding. Lena Carter, mid-20s, with sharp eyes and a voice that cut through the noise. This isn't just about buildings, she said. It's about trust. This community lost people here. We need to know the city cares. Caleb's chest tightened. Lena was the sister of one of the boys he'd saved, Malik. Her parents were the ones he hadn't. She didn't know him, but he knew her face from the funeral, her grief raw and accusing. After the meeting, Caleb lingered outside, lighting a cigarette he didn't really want. Lena approached, her expression unreadable. You're Caleb Reed, aren't you? Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. He nodded, bracing himself. Yeah. I remember you, she said. Malik talks about you sometimes, says you carried him out like he weighed nothing. She paused, her eyes searching his. He doesn't know why you didn't go back for Mom and Dad. Caleb's throat closed. I tried, he said, the words barely audible. I don't need your excuses, Lena cut in. I need you to show up. We're starting a youth program at the new center. Malik needs someone to look up to. You owe him that much. Caleb wanted to say no, to run from the responsibility, but her words hit something deep, a spark of purpose he thought he'd lost. I'll think about it, he said finally. The fracture. Caleb's ex-wife, Mara, lived in a quiet suburb outside Chicago with Sophie, now 7. He drove out to see her, his old pickup rattling with every mile. Mara greeted him at the door, her face a mix of pity and exhaustion. She's at school, she said. You should have called. I just wanted to see her, Caleb said, shifting uncomfortably. How's she doing? She asks about you, Mara said, her voice softening. But she's scared, Caleb. You disappeared on her. I didn't disappear, he snapped, then caught himself. I'm trying, Mara. I'm trying to be better. Mara's eyes softened, but only slightly. Then prove it, She deserves a father, not a ghost. Back in his apartment, Caleb stared at a photo of Sophie in her soccer uniform, her gap-toothed smile beaming. He hadn't been there for her first game, or the one after that. The guilt was a familiar weight, heavier than the fire. He pulled out his phone and texted Lena. "I'm in. Tell me when and where." The youth center. The youth center was a work in progress, its walls still bare, and its floors scuffed from construction. Lena ran the program with fierce determination, mentoring kids like Malik who carried their own scars from the neighborhood's violence and loss. Caleb showed up on the first day, feeling out of place among the teenagers, shooting hoops and trading insults. Malik, now 15, was taller than Caleb remembered, his eyes guarded but curious. "You're the firefighter guy," he said, dribbling a basketball. "Lena says you're helping out." "Yeah," Caleb said, unsure how to connect. "Thought I'd give back," Malik smirked. "You don't look like the hero type no more." Caleb flinched but forced a smile. "Guess I'm working on that." The days at the center were long, filled with organizing activities, breaking up fights, and listening to kids who carried more pain than they let on. Caleb found himself drawn to Malik, who reminded him of himself at that age, angry, lost, but hungry for something better. They started talking, first about basketball, then about life. Malik shared stories of his parents, how his mom used to sing while cooking, how his dad taught him to ride a bike. Each memory was a knife in Caleb's chest, but he listened, letting the boy's words fill the silence he'd carried for years. Lena watched from a distance, her judgment softening, but never fully gone. "You're doing okay," she told Caleb one evening, "but don't think this makes us square." "I don't," Caleb said quietly. "I just want to do right by him." The spark of redemption. Weeks turned into months, and Caleb found a rhythm at the center. He wasn't a hero, but he was there, showing up for kids who needed someone to believe in them. He started coaching the basketball team, his gruff encouragement earning reluctant respect. Malik began opening up, even calling him coach one day, a small victory that felt bigger than any medal. But the past wasn't done with Caleb. One night, a local news outlet ran a story about the Englewood fire, digging up old wounds. "Hero or failure?" the headline read, with Caleb's name plastered across it. The article questioned his decision that night, rehashing the tragedy in brutal detail. Social media exploded, and Caleb's phone buzzed with messages, some supportive, most cruel. At the center, the kids noticed. Malik confronted him, his voice sharp. "Is it true? You could have saved them, but didn't." Caleb's jaw tightened. "It wasn't that simple, Malik. I tried. I swear I tried." Malik walked away, his silence louder than any accusation. Lena pulled Caleb aside. "You need to tell him the truth. All of it. He deserves that." That night, Caleb sat Malik down and told him everything. The chaos of the fire, the split-second choice, the collapse that trapped him. "I see your parents' faces every day," he admitted, his voice raw. "I'd give anything to change it." Malik didn't forgive him, not outright, but he listened. "You're still here," he said finally. "That's something." A father's promise. Caleb's efforts to reconnect with Sophie were slower, more fragile. He started visiting regularly, bringing her favorite chocolate chip cookies and sitting through her endless stories about school. Mara watched warily but didn't stop him. One Saturday, Sophie hugged him tightly, her small arms anchoring him to something he thought he'd lost. "Don't go away again, Daddy," she whispered. "I won't," Caleb promised, though he wasn't sure he could keep it. The weight of his past still pulled at him, threatening to drag him under. Mara noticed the change in him, though. "You're different," she said one evening, handing him a coffee as Sophie played nearby. "Not fixed, but trying." "Trying's all I got," Caleb said, meeting her eyes. For the first time in years, they shared a quiet moment, not as exes, but as two people who'd once loved each other. The breaking point. The youth center's grand opening was a community event with music, food, and speeches. Caleb stood in the background, watching Malik shoot hoops with the other kids. Lena gave a speech, her voice fierce and hopeful. "This is our home now," she said, "a place to heal, to grow, to remember." But the celebration was cut short. A fire broke out in a nearby building, the sirens echoing through the night. Caleb froze, his body reacting before his mind could catch up. Javier was there, leading the response, and he grabbed Caleb's arm. "We need you, man. You're still one of us." Caleb hesitated, the memories flooding back. But he saw Malik watching, his eyes wide with fear and something else. Trust. Caleb grabbed a spare helmet and ran toward the blaze, his heart pounding. This time he wasn't running from the fire, but into it. The building was a warehouse, flames licking the walls. Caleb worked with the team, pulling 2 workers to safety before the structure gave way. When he emerged covered in soot, Malik ran to him, throwing his arms around him. "You did it," he said, his voice choked. Caleb didn't feel like a hero, but for the first time, he didn't feel like a failure either. The long road. The fire made headlines again, but this time Caleb's name was tied to courage. The community saw him differently, and so did he. He kept coaching at the center, rebuilding his bond with Malik and Lena, who finally offered him a nod of respect. "You're not who I thought you were," she said. "Keep proving me wrong." With Sophie, Caleb became a constant presence, attending her games and reading her bedtime stories. Mara didn't take him back, but they found a fragile peace, co-parenting with care. Caleb's apartment was still small, but it felt less empty, filled with Sophie's drawings and Malik's old basketball. The weight of the past never fully lifted, but Caleb learned to carry it. He wasn't the hero he'd once been, nor the failure he'd feared. He was just a man, piecing himself back together. One day, one choice, one fire at a time. The ashes settle. A year later, Caleb stood at the new housing complex, now complete. A plaque honored the lives lost in the fire, including Malik's parents. Caleb traced their names with his finger, his throat tight. Malik joined him, quieter now, more grown than Caleb wanted to admit. "You think they'd be proud?" Malik asked. Caleb nodded. "Yeah, of you especially." Malik smiled, a rare, real smile. "You too, coach." That night, Caleb drove to Mara's house, Sophie asleep in the back seat. He looked at her in the rearview mirror, her face peaceful, and felt something he hadn't in years. Hope. The fire still burned in his dreams, but it no longer defined him. He was rebuilding not just a community, but himself. Shadows of the law. Just as Caleb began to find his footing, a new storm hit. A lawyer representing families affected by the Inglewood fire filed a civil lawsuit against the city and Station 19, naming Caleb as a key figure. The claim, negligence, in the response that night. The news spread like wildfire, dragging Caleb's name back into the headlines. "Disgraced firefighter faces legal battle," one outlet screamed. Caleb sat in his apartment, the legal notice trembling in his hands. The lawsuit didn't just threaten his reputation. It could drain what little savings he had and jeopardize his fragile progress with Sophie and Malik. Javier called him that night. "This is bullshit, Caleb. The department's got your back. We'll fight this." But Caleb wasn't so sure. The lawsuit reopened old wounds, forcing him to relive that night in depositions and meetings with lawyers. The lead attorney, a sharp woman named Diane Kessler, grilled him relentlessly. "Why did you prioritize the children, Mr. Reed? Did you assess the structural risks adequately?" "I did what I thought was right," Caleb said, his voice steady but his hands clenched. "I'd do it again." Diane's eyes narrowed. "That's not what the families want to hear." Lena caught wind of the lawsuit and confronted Caleb at the center. "Is this true? They're saying you messed up." Her voice was sharp, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes, like she wanted him to prove her wrong. "I made a call," Caleb said. "It haunts me every day. But I saved Malik. I saved his brother. That's what I know." Lena studied him, then nodded slowly. "Malik trusts you. Don't break that." The trial of trust. The lawsuit dragged on. Each court date, a battle. Caleb's lawyer, a pro bono advocate named Samir Patel, argued that the fire's intensity and the building's poor condition were the real culprits, not Caleb's actions. But the plaintiff's stories, grieving families, lost homes, were powerful. Caleb sat in the courtroom, feeling the weight of their pain, knowing he carried it too. Malik started pulling away, skipping basketball practice. Caleb found him one evening behind the center, smoking a cigarette. "You're just gonna let them drag you down?" Malik asked, his voice bitter. "You're supposed to be strong." Caleb took the cigarette from him, crushing it under his boot. "I'm not strong, kid. I'm just here, and I'm not going anywhere, no matter what they say." Malik looked away, but he didn't leave. It was a start. At home, Sophie sensed the tension. "Are you in trouble, Daddy?" she asked one night, her eyes wide. Caleb knelt beside her. "Some people think I made a mistake, but I'm fighting to make things right, okay?" She nodded, hugging him tightly. "I believe you." A fragile peace. The lawsuit ended in a settlement, with the city covering damages, but no formal blame on Caleb. It wasn't a victory, but it was closure. The headlines faded, and Caleb returned to the center, where the kids greeted him with fist bumps and cautious smiles. Malik started showing up again, even helping coach the younger kids. Lena invited Caleb to a memorial event for the fire's victims, held at the new housing complex. Families gathered, lighting candles and sharing stories. Lena spoke, her voice steady. "We lost so much, but we're still here. We build on." Caleb stood beside her, holding a candle for Malik's parents. When Malik joined them, placing his own candle, Caleb felt a shift, like the ashes were finally settling. The man in the mirror. Months later, Caleb was offered a part-time role back at Station 19, not as a firefighter but as a trainer for new recruits. Javier pushed for it, believing Caleb had something to teach. "You've been through the fire, man. That's worth more than you think." Caleb hesitated but accepted, finding purpose in guiding others. He wasn't the hero he'd once been, but he was something else, a survivor, flawed but fighting. With Sophie, he became a steady presence, planning her 8th birthday with Mara, who smiled at him in a way that felt like forgiveness. One night, Caleb and Malik sat on the center steps, watching the city lights. "You ever think about quitting?" Malik asked. "Every day," Caleb said. "But then I think about you, Sophie, Lena. You all keep me going." Malik nodded, tossing a basketball between his hands. "You're all right, coach." The flame within. The following summer, the youth center hosted a community festival with games, music, and a basketball tournament. Caleb coached Malik's team to a win, the crowd cheering as Malik sank the final shot. Sophie ran to Caleb, her face painted with stars, and hugged him. Mara watched from the sidelines, a quiet pride in her eyes. Lena approached, holding a plaque for Caleb, recognizing his work at the center. "You didn't just show up," she said. "You stayed." Caleb took the plaque, his throat tight. The fire still haunted him, but it no longer ruled him. He looked at Sophie, Malik, and the community around him, and for the first time, he felt like he belonged, not to the past, but to the present. The weight of ashes was still there, but it was lighter now, carried by a man who'd learned to live with his scars and keep moving forward.